Welcome along, one and all. You are watching PSGL Season 38 PSF3 brought to you by GT Omega. The opening exchanges of this season are now in the memory, and we continue marching on tonight, visiting a circuit etched into F1 legend. We are at Spa-Francorchamps for the third round of the championship, which will be the Belgian Grand Prix. To take you through the action here tonight, you have myself, Daka, as usual. And alongside me, it is not Ghost, as you've become used to, but in fact, we have your usual PSF4 commentator from last season, Quen. How are you this evening?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good. I'm happy to finally be back in the commentary box for this season, and thank you for having me here in F3.
Now it's going to be wonderful, and I guess I don't know if we are like completely qualified to announce it, but we should be seeing you returning back to the commentary box for good in PSGL very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. We've finally got a commentary partner sorted for myself. Of course, Mike, my commentary partner for the past 3 or 4 seasons, has unfortunately had to drop down to a reserve role, so hope all is well with Mike. But yeah, I'm excited to get my commentary started for this season. Of course, from next week I'll be back in F4.
Yep, can't wait to see that. Make sure to have a look for that next week. I know a lot of you guys have probably been missing that stream for the fourth tier of PlayStation Leagues on PSGL, so keep an eye out for that. Looking here in PSF3, though, onto the third round of the season. We had a wonderful race last time out at the Circuit of the Americas. Absolutely chaotic stuff out there with Alex Marciano again taking the win, and to be honest, fairly comfortably given the chaos of the rest of the race. Second win of the season. He's only 1 point off of max points because he got pole position and fastest lap at the season opener in Australia, and then just the pole position at US. So he has 35 points, and he's 15 points clear of second placed NLR Tom, last season's PSF5 champion. So that is a pretty menacing prospect for the rest of this PSF3 grid to try and hunt him down, but we still have 10 rounds to go in the season, starting off with the third round of the championship here at Spa. And this qualifying session gearing up now. I think ML Slash is just coming around. Slash, I believe, the first driver out there on the track in the Williams, opening up that DRS over the lane. I'll leave it to Quinn to take us through this lap.
Yeah, so coming up to La Source of turn 1, you want to just clip the apex, which he does, and then coming up to probably the most famous two corners. We've got Eau Rouge into Radion. Up here, takes a lot of the curb on the entry, but gets nice speed going. DRS activated, going up to, well, it's very high speed straight, nearly up to 210 miles an hour is Slash. I didn't quite see the first sector split, but now you just want to hug the inside as much as you can and get on the throttle early to maximize the exit speed. Very clean, a little bit too much over the curb, but keeps it going. Now into Huon and sticking through 7th up into 8th on the oh no, stays in 7th down into 4th here. He's just absolutely pinning it through here now. Doesn't take as much as a curb, but keeps the speed going through there. Coming up, you don't want to turn too much and scrub off speed here, and does exactly that. Now up to the bus stop chicane. Gets it nicely turned in, has a little bit of a moment on the exit of the first part, but up to the line. Slash, first time on the board with a 1:41.7,
That
which
is
is immediately beaten by Spicer.
Yeah, spies are incredibly fast in qualifying. That has been the case for the last couple of seasons for a certainty. So he goes fastest on a .3. Matisse splits the two times then on a 41.5, and then Napple on 41.9. AGK Racing goes fastest on a 41.2. That's a bit of a turn up for the books in the opening exchanges, but let's see, we've got a lot more lap times to come in just the next few seconds. Let's see, as that was the RB of Moy Cooley coming over the line. Aston Martin is next of Lakita. No, never mind. That was Alex Marciano, the championship leader. Bale on that lap and is actually hitting that bus stop chicane, straightening up, getting on to the loud pedal out of that final corner, and goes into 11th on a 42.4. Mattia Manga and the Ferrari navigating that bus stop chicane as well, getting that all straightened up. A little bit of oversteer on the exit and goes into P11, replacing Lakitu on a .2. And that seems to be most of the first runs out the way, I think, by Morandi. And the second kick Sauber coming through now goes 9th on a 41.9. So that is the opening laps done, in AGK Racing having the top time at the moment. A driver who we saw in the opening round in Australia didn't go well. Missed out in the year round in Kota. Is actually a reserve driver in the field, so gets the nod for tonight and puts in a stonking time of 41.2, and that's going to take some beating as other drivers line up to get their lap times in. 6 minutes into the session and the kick Sauber on top.
Yeah, of from what we saw of Slash, it looked like a pretty solid lap. But yeah, seeing AGK Racing and Spicer and Galaxy, they've all three of them are putting very solid laps, and yeah, could see all three of them still at the top come the end of the session.
Very, very possible. Of course, we've seen, I'd say generally that's been the case throughout this season. The driver who's made the early impression in the first runs has ended up taking that pole position, which of course on both occasions this season has been Alex Marciano. And really that first run was the first time this season where we've seen him falter. He has simply not put a foot wrong all throughout the season so far. Of course, only 2 rounds of it, but nevertheless has been extremely strong. The Aston Martin is gearing up for a lap, although TGF Spyros will be the first driver to come through then. Pole position at Spa, we talked about what it means heading into the race. I think one of my favourite, I would say, just moments of any F1 season is that first sector in the race where they navigate the tight hairpin of La Source and then a full throttle run down into Eau Rouge, up through Radion, and then down the Kemmel Straight. It is absolutely thrilling every time, and it makes pole position, I would say, at this track always quite a tricky one to defend.
Yeah, because, well, I'd say potentially P2 or P3 are the best places to start. I mean, especially P2 is if you can stick behind the person leading. Well, coming down main straight, you're just gonna get all of the slipstream, and you're just gonna be eating up the gap and potentially take the lead going into sector 2. So yeah, I'd say starting on P1, although you do get pole position and you have the advantage, but the real advantage is starting P2 or P3.
Yeah, that certainly means that you can attack from behind. But one thing I love about Spa is the contrast between the sectors, because Sector 1 and Sector 3 have extended full throttle zones. A couple of slow corners in there with Last Source, the first corner, and the bus stop chicane right at the end of the lap. But that second sector is filled with, very high speed corners all the way through and not much of an emphasis on straight line speed, and that's where a lot of the lap time can be won or lost here, because well, what that does mean though is that setting up the car for this race can also be very tricky for the drivers.
Yeah, definitely can. If you do set the car up for, well, this sector 1 and sector 3, you're going to be losing quite a bit of time through sector 2, whereas if you set the car up for the downforce heavy nature of sector 2, you're going to be losing heaps amount of time in sector 1 and sector 3, and there is the time from Alex Marciano that we've all been waiting for, a 41.1. over a tenth faster than AGK Racing.
Kicks off exactly where he left off. IRT Fleddy goes into position number 3 on a 41.3 in these early stages. So we are seeing more and more times come on to the board. Just 3 drivers who haven't set times up to this point in the session. So let's have a further look and see. We're seeing a lot of drivers getting their laps started off. Galaxy Slayer Lakitu is a little bit further back, as is ASRT Geppo and Mattia Manga. So most of the drivers just getting their second laps underway. And I believe, just trying to find someone that's further along the lap, I believe the Red Bull of Zvidek, who's running 13.7 through the first 2 sectors, and that is a pretty good time. It's only a tenth of a second behind where the likes of Alex Marciano, Fleddy were through those first 2 sectors. So as Zvidek can hook up a good last chicane here, this could be very solid. Bit of rear locking on the way in now, has to control that rear end on the way through, gets on to the accelerator pedal, crosses the line, goes 7th on a 141.655, just about half a second off of the provisional pole time at the moment. Matisse has gone very strongly through the first 2 sectors, so this could be a fast one. It is, and it's good enough for third place at the moment on a low .3, just in front of where IRT Fleddy is. So we are seeing more and more times coming on to the board. NLR Tom, second in the championship at the moment, podiums in both of the first 2 rounds. Someone that's really more suited to racing generally than qualifying throughout this season, but going against that trend and going into second position on a 41.239, just pepping AGK Racing, who didn't get a good second run in. A lot of other drivers are coming to the line now. Vessel in the Haas goes 8th and improves onto a 41.5. And yeah, it is super impressive stuff seeing all these drivers continue to make these improvements. It's a tricky one here at Spa for qualifying because, well, there are just so many corners. I believe 20 of them in all. A lap time above the 140 mark, and well, if you look at it from that perspective, having to go through 1 minute 40 of driving at the absolute limit without making a single mistake, which is going to be the requirement if you want to be at the front here, that is a pretty daunting task for these
Oh,
drivers.
sorry to cut you off there, but I was just on board with Lakitu going, was just starting a flying lap, and into La Source, he just had massive amount of rear locking, and he basically went sideways through the apex of turn 1, so not a great start to Lakitu's lap. Yeah, it's just a massive snap, and he is still going with his lap, so guess he still thinks that there is time to be found. Of course, he is currently the slowest out of all of the drivers who have set a lap. Of course, it is only Triest that hasn't.
Oh!
But yeah, that is the key to his spun.
Yeah, drops it out of no name corner, and yeah, that's going to bring a lap to an end. The key to really not having a good time with it in qualifying so far this season. Currently on a 42.4. There is still time. Of course, it is Spa. You don't get many runs, which makes things very tricky to get the right execution in. Just because of, again, the mammoth lap distance over 7 kilometers. That puts a lot of pressure on all of the drivers to get the best possible lap in. And Alex Marciano currently, once again, does have that impression on everyone else, but so far not by the margin that we've seen throughout the rest of the season. Last time out at the Circuit of the Americas, completely dominant in qualifying, was a full a quarter of a second, clear of second place Galaxy Slayer. So currently under a bit more pressure. Tom right up then. Top 2 in the championship are top 2 in the session. And we're in a bit of a lull here with most of the drivers just in that transition point. Most of them are in the pits. So we've got a bit of a calm before the storm. And I imagine a lot of drivers thereafter will be out on the track and searching for that 11th hour run in the final few minutes here. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and we do have 2 drivers currently out on track. Well, Spiros has just started his final flying lap, and Galaxy Slayer is just about to start it. I believe Miranvi is just on an in lap at the moment, so it's just Galaxy Slayer and Spiros on fast laps at the moment.
Yep, so other than that, we're just waiting on most of the drivers to get themselves started. So we'll watch Spiros now. Getting it through at Malmedy corner, then losing the rear end just a little bit. Keeps it under control, however. Currently on a 141.831. And a couple of tenths will put him into the top 10. A bit more than that, well, you never know. The gaps tend to be a little bit bigger around Spa, again, because it is such a long lap and so difficult to hook up. So we'll see what the Greek driver can do in that Red Bull, flicking it in to the Lefania chicane, opening up that throttle pedal, keeping it nicely under control again. This lap looks very solid up to this point, and by the times it is. Wow, that's a quick sector 2 time, just inside 113.4, 113.399. That's a very fast time in the opening to the lap, and if the last sector is hooked up, who knows? So let's see, currently 14th at the moment, gearing up towards that final corner, bit of an uphill climb, and slamming on that brake pedal, down the gears into third, just about manages to control it on the way in, and on the way out gets onto the throttle pedal. Watch the clock here, it's a fast lap, but it's not enough to take pole position still for Spiros. That is a sensational time, a 141.2 I should say, goes fastest, just misses out on Alex Marciano, Galaxy Slayer and the rest lining up, and we're going to get a manic last 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was just, I think all of the time was in Sector 2. I believe just through Sector 1 he gained 800ths of a second on his previous lap time, as that is Galaxy Slayer only going 8 thousandths of a second slower, so P3 for him at the moment, but he's still got, well, the other 17 drivers to set a lap time.
Yep, and they're all coming over the line one by one to step up to the plate. IRT Nick has just kicked off a flying lap in the Williams, currently in 14th position, just about 6 tenths off that provisional pole time. I said gaps do tend to be a bit big around Spa. That's not been the case so far, but
Oh,
Nick invalidating at the last part of Radion, and this is what you're going to see increasingly in these last few runs as drivers begin to push the limits more and more. Invalidations, other mistakes start to creep in as they try to find the last couple of tenths out there to move up the grid.
yeah, they're going to be completely on edge. They're going to take advantage of all of the track available to them just to find the few tenths or even few hundredths of a second to move them up. But yeah, Moy Cully is just coming up to Sector 2. He's nearly 1.5 tenths up on his previous lap time, which would already move himself ahead of Gippo. Yeah, I'm just going to stick on board with Moy Cully for now, as I believe most of the other drivers, apart from 3, are just on their flying laps. So the times are going to be coming thick and fast here. But Moy Cully's going to be the first out of many on a flying lap to put their final times on the board.
Yep, I think our brains are going to be working overtime in the next couple of minutes. Lakitu has decided to call it a session, so we'll start no higher than 18th position. Moikuli still tracking fairly nicely, just over 2 tenths of a second up at the moment, but that is only just in front of Geppo, as you said, so needs a stellar last chicane as the clock expires, and finally we're going to get the conclusion of this Spa qualifying session. So, Moikuli up towards that final corner, down shifting through the gears, goes second briefly, back up to third for the last couple of corners. Traction critical out of here, gets on to the throttle pedal, is going to go 11th with a good last sector on a 141.6. Next up, NLR Tom, currently fourth, finding a bit of time too. This would be enough for pole if he gets a good last sector, and it is! Fastest at the moment on a 41.122, but Alex Marciano is finding more time out there in that Aston Martin. Gets a bit of oversteer though through the last couple of corners, gets onto the throttle pedal second at the moment, and it is fastest again, nearly into the 1 minute 40s. That's a super lap from Alex Marciano. Can it be beaten? Matisse is sixth in the Ferrari. AGK Racing is finding some time. Spies are a good lap, goes into second place. The second place finisher in the last round at Kota. AGK Racing has bowed out of the lap. Moranvi is still circulating out there, as is Vessel in the Haas further up ahead, 2 tenths up on his lap at the very least. Could be looking at a lower end top 10, maybe more if it's a good run through the bus stop. Big oversteer on the exit though for the Haas, and it's going to be 8th on a 41.2. Moranvi, I think, is going to be the last driver to come over the line. 9th at the moment. Where will it be at the end of the lap? 4th on a 141.188. And I think that is it for qualifying. And no one can stop this man. At the moment, Alex Marciano, 3 poles in 3 attempts. NPSF 3 this season. Spicer 800ths behind, so he was pushed, but yeah, as it stands, there is just no one in PSF 3 that can match the blinding speed of Alex Marciano.
Yeah, it was, well, from what you've said, it wasn't as much of a gap as we're used to here, but just going through the qualifying order, we do have Alex Marciano topping the timesheets with Spicer in second, Tom in third. Good effort from the McLarens. Then we have Moranvi, Spyros, Galaxy Slayer, AGK Racing, Matisse, Vessel, Fleddy, Zviadek, Slash, Napple, Moikali, Nick, Gippo, Mattia Manga, Lakitu, and Triest was the only person to not set a lap time.
And that brings qualifying to a close, and we will look forward to the Grand Prix at Spa and the way it could unfold, because I think racing at Spa brings upon such a large amount of unpredictability. I think that's the key word. There's a number of different strategies that you can run. Most drivers tend to start on the hard tire here, but you can go extra. Of course, last season we also raced at Spa, and we saw the eventual champion of PSF3, NLR Kuhlman, absolutely storm through the field by starting on the mediums when most other drivers were on the hards, and ended up finishing second in that race from well down the field, and that proved to be very critical in that championship challenge, rescuing a load of points from that race. As we please pay little attention to what you're seeing in front of your screens. This is just a bit of a mock start to the race before we eventually get the real thing underway very, very shortly. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to emphasize here, is that level of unpredictability. It's a track that does allow for a lot of overtaking, especially down the Kemmel Straight with DRS, but there are other opportunities out there on the track as well. And that means that the order can be reshuffled. Weather can play a big role here at Spa, so just being at the front of the start is not enough. You're really going to be under pressure throughout the entire 22 lap distance.
Yeah, like I was saying during the qualifying session, if you can, well, the starting in pole position isn't necessarily the best place to start. It's the two positions behind, I reckon, in second and third, that you can get a massive benefit of having a slipstream down the straight.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep an eye out for that. Again, as I said earlier, it is a scene that I love, that run down the Kemmel Straight after the climb up Radion. That is what is in store for us later on. So make sure to stay tuned. We should get that race underway very, very shortly. Of course, we talk about a lot on the F1 game, especially in these higher tiers of racing, is the prevalence of the DRS train and the role it plays in racing. It's so difficult to break away. There are opportunities here at Spa because of that sector 2. If you're quick and confident through those corners in the middle of the lap, you can pull away, but I think it's just inherent to this game that is so difficult, and that means that unless we get another wet race like we did in Australia, I think you can count on a fight at the front of the field that's going to last long into the Grand Prix coming up.
Yeah, you definitely, but I think the one thing that's sort of going against that is the fact that that Spa-Francorchamps is a circuit that only has one DRS zone. So going through sector 2, you could see gaps really, well, massive gaps created if people are more confident than others, like you said. So I think the one thing that the circuit has going against the DRS trains is the fact that it's only got one DRS zone.
Yeah, and of course, last season here in PSF3, we did see CPI Fraser, who narrowly missed out on the championship, of course, uh, come very well. Actually, I should say, came very close to the championship, but in the race at Spa itself, won very convincingly. He did get undercut by Koan briefly, but ended up going on to win that race by a margin of about 5 seconds, which in league racing terms is especially PSF3 terms is quite a big margin. Just as we have a bit of downtime ahead of the race, a quick word for PSGL's sponsors. PSGL is sponsored by GT Omega. A link to their site is in the video description. If you decide to purchase any of their products, if that takes your fancy, then you can use the code PSGL at their site at checkout for a 5% discount. We are partnered also with Sim Racing Centre, or SRC for short. If you're in need of setups or coaching on the F1 game, SRC is just the place to look. They are also to be found in the video description. There's a 10% discount on all of their products. Now, it's something that I've mentioned a couple of times in the last couple of minutes, and it's something that is certainly not a guarantee ahead of this race. And we've only had, I would say, in the time that I've been commentating PSF3, which is a season and a bit, there's only been one such race, but rain does play a bit of a role here at Spa. It can certainly intervene. We've had a wet race, of course, in Australia a couple of rounds ago, and that's another potential obstacle for the drivers. This may, of course, be a point that comes to nothing, but I'd say if you look at the spectrum of tracks on the calendar, Spa would lean more towards those where rain is much more of a possibility.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's one of the more difficult tracks I'd say to navigate in the wet, just because of the nature of the circuit being more high speed dominated. You gotta compromise your setup if it is a wet race, and some people might not have done wet practice, or some people might have anticipated it being a wet race. So it all depends on how prepared you are for it being a wet race.
And of course, just how adaptable you are as a driver. That is a skill that is thoroughly tested by wet conditions. Of course, that may not prove to be the case. We shall see when we eventually do get lights out in just a few minutes' time. So 22 laps of Spa in front of us. Well, I can't wait to get it underway. Well, we have a bit of downtime. Actually, we are just loading in. About the we've mentioned the drivers' situation briefly, the drivers' championship with Alex Marciano leading on 35 points. That's 15 ahead of second place NLR Tom. Then you have Triska, who was second in the opening round, and Spicer, who was second in the last round. But both of them making mistakes in the first and second rounds themselves, respectively. So that brings them both onto 14 points as it stands, and they are third and fourth. Triska third and Spicer in fourth. Galaxy Slayer rounds out the top five at the moment on 13 points, being in the top six in both of the opening two rounds. But the really close battle here at the moment is in the constructors. Of course, you mentioned how good McLaren seem to be in qualifying, and that's been the story throughout this season. Spicer and Tom have been right at the sharp end of the field, both of them so far in pretty much every eventuality. They completed the podium last time out in Kota with second for Spicer and third for Tom. Tom was also third at the season opener in Australia. But Spicer, oh my goodness, Spicer finished ninth after crashing late. And well, I did talk about rain, the
Ooh.
possibility of it. That's not just light drizzle. That is a very substantial shower that these drivers have got to deal with.
Yeah, reminiscent of that race that we shall not mention. Well, the race that wasn't really a race. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's like we were saying before, it's going to take, well, like you were saying, it's going to take a lot of adaptability, and especially it's looking like it's going to be full wet conditions here at Spa.
Yeah, I'm seeing wet tires selected in the pit lane, and the other thing with a wet race here at Spa is that a lot of the corners here that you'd consider fairly easy in the dry, like Blanchimont or Radion, they become so much more challenging in wet conditions. They are certainly no longer flat. That is going to test these drivers' control to the absolute limit. Spa is probably, I would say, one of the tracks that is most transformed in terms of difficulty from dry to wet. It is substantially more treacherous when rain is lighting the track. When that moisture sets into the track surface, that is going to make things so much more difficult for the drivers. We are just seconds away from the race start. Should be starting at 34 minutes past the hour, and that is just a few seconds away from now. So we should be ready to get things kicked off very, very shortly with Alex Marciano taking yet another pole position. And we did see how fast he was in the wet too. At the opening round in Australia, but he was pressured in that race by Spicer, also a driver who loves these wet conditions, and they are both right at the front of the field. So that is a massively exciting prospect for this Belgian Grand Prix. And yeah, that's the complexion of this race changes massively. We'll see if the weather does hold out like this as it did in Australia, because wow, 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 that is probably the heaviest rain you could possibly get on this game. Maybe not quite as heavy as Interlagos yesterday in real life, but still quite treacherous. That's what the drivers are going to have to put up with. Here in Belgium, we have 5 lights. And they leave the grid for the third round of the season. It's a good start from Spicer. Spicer gets up and alongside Alex Marciano, immediately heading into last source. Alex Marciano lunges to the inside, tries to squeeze his way through, but Spicer does get himself into the lead, and there's a swirling Zviadek further back, managing to hold on to it, but Spicer does have that lead, leading Alex Marciano up Radion. They battle for grip out there, trying to get those tires to bite as Spicer leads them along from Alex, and then NLR Tom picking up that slipstream, looking towards the inside. McLaren are coming forward here. It's Tom trying to get through into Lecom, nothing doing then as the spray obscures all the cars as they head through the middle sector. Now I can barely see a thing in the middle of the field. Napple is resisting pressure from Zviadek, and Fleddy too in the Mercedes, who gets a little bit out of shape, tucks in behind the Red Bull in the middle of the field. The two Williams are battling it out, Nick and Slash. Things may finally settle down as we head into the high speed sections, where you really do not want to be running side by side, but nevertheless at the front, a brilliant start from NLR Spicer, jumping Alex Marciano, and gets that lead away from the start and has clear vision. That must be invaluable in these conditions.
Yeah, definitely is. And just going through the first few corners, I saw an end plate, and I believe it was from Matisse, as he is missing his front left end plate and is holding up all of the drivers behind. And yeah, he's going to be really struggling for downforce of course in these conditions you're going to need all the downforce you can get. Yeah, he's going to be really struggling, and it's actually Galaxy Slayer as well is dropping back from the back of AGK Racing. So at the moment it's all clean, apart from Matisse obviously having a damaged car, and he's just sliding all over the place. Yeah, it's looked like a decently clean start for everyone else. That is Gippo, who is 4 seconds back from everyone else. I don't see any damage, so he must have had a spin somewhere, or he's just not favourable in these conditions. But going back to the front, Tom was right on the back of Alex, but that is Miranvi getting side by side, but he's just backing out. He's not going to go for the move here, but still Spicer leading the race as the two Sauber cars are getting very close to each other.
Yeah, well, both those two kick Saubers looked very, very rapid in these early laps, though, able to keep very close. And Moranvi, as you said, was pressuring NLR Tom down that Kemmel straight. Remains position 4 for the time being, but looks very, very racy. Spicer just dictating the pace at the moment. Alex Marciano not having much trouble following as it stands. Of course, the two drivers, I would say, who have most defined the start to the season, fighting for the win in all three of the opening rounds. Spicer, of course, came off worse for wear in the other wet race in Australia, that's for sure, after crashing into the wall in the last couple of laps. He had a better time of it in Kota, but penalties that time worked against him in favour of Alex Marciano. This time he has all the track possession, but Alex following nicely in behind as it stands, as Tom gets a big snap of oversteer out of curve. Paul Frere, that's puts again Moranvi all over him. And as you said, though, it is this top 5 looking to have that pace advantage over everyone else. Galaxy Slayer is struggling to live with that pace, and Spiros has moved through. Matisu gets a time penalty. That has been a really rough start to the race for the Ferrari driver so far. That end plate damage, you would think on the wet it doesn't make quite as much of a difference, but it makes things so much more difficult still for the Ferrari man, and slips down into position number 8. Has a time penalty, actually something you don't see too much of at Spa. So Matisse just has to soldier on, has to stay in it, but yeah, it's not been the start to the race the Ferrari man was looking for.
Yeah, and just looking at the position changes so far from the start of this race, the big winner from this is actually Nick gaining 4 positions, and the person who's lost the most is Vessel losing 5. So good start for Nick so far, but not being an amazing start for Vessel.
A Vessel in the Haas slips down into position 14 at the moment. Has had a very good start to the season, actually. Was right in the thick of it last time out in Kota for sure, and running out there, but needs to try and recover. Nick trying to move up another spot, fighting away with CPI Napple, but the Alpine does not give way and holds on to that 10th position for the time being. Has lost contact a bit with Sviatek up the road, holding on to that top 10 in the final points paying possession for the time being, though Nick chasing and behind as they go through. Oh my goodness, this wet weather makes things so tricky out there, and these drivers all have to deal with it, but they're doing a sterling job, this entire field as it stands at the moment. But we're just under 3 laps into the Belgian Grand Prix, and at the front of the race, not a great deal changing. Spicer took the lead off the start away from Alex Marciano and has simply held onto it up at the front for the moment. Alex is just following, and Thomas had to resist a bit of pressure from the two Kicksabers. That is the lay of the land so far. Gaps not too big, it must be said. Spyros hasn't quite come up towards Galaxy Slayer, hasn't gapped Matisse by that much, and Matisse, I would say, really, though, at this point, proving to be that cork in the bottle. The drivers are really all stacking up behind him as Spyros runs wide, gets a 10-second time penalty for corner cutting. So we'll see about the stewards room, but that could be a very costly error. Currently in 7th at the moment. 10 seconds is not a little margin as Nick again tries to attack Napple in towards last source this time. Gets a nose ahead of the Alpine. It's a fight for traction on the exit. It looks like Nick is going to be able to win out of that one. And up another place now. 5 spots up in the race and gaining 2 more with penalties to Nick. A super start to this race, but how on earth that penalty is going to be so costly as Tom slipstreams Alex Marciano, moves up into 2nd. McLaren are now 1 and 2. So Tom getting through, backing up Spicer now, and Alex Marciano having to fight for it. But those McLarens, they were good in the wet last time out in the wet race in Australia, and they have been really rock solid so far as well. Alex down to 3rd place. Those two McLarens look very racy today.
Yeah, they really are. They're looking like they've got the ultimate pace here. But just going back to the move Nick made on Napple, I was on board with Nick when he got the move done, and it all started at a bus stop chicane where Napple just went in a bit too deep and compromised his line through the second part, and Nick took full advantage of that and went down the inside and just did switch back to the inside for the source and got the move done. So even a little mistake like going wide on the entry can really detriment you in the following corners.
And these PSF3 drivers will take any opportunity they can to move themselves up the order. You saw that there with Nick. He knows that very well with 5 places gained in the race so far. Napple is under pressure again, this time from IRT Fleddy, who slipstreams towards the bus stop chicane. Can't quite find the way through on the entry there. But certainly tucked in nicely behind that Alpine, who's having to look behind rather than in front. Spyros at the front has not been able to pull away from Matisse at all, and is actually proving to be a bit of a cork in the bottle. This train extends all the way down to P18. That's Lakitu in that 18th place at the moment. Geppo, again, as you said earlier, really does not seem to gel with these conditions. Really struggling out there, nearly 7 seconds adrift of the next lowest placed driver. But yeah, Spyros proving to be that cork in the bottle. Fleddy picks up a time penalty through Radion, and does being in the wet, I wonder if that makes things more difficult as Fleddy slipstreams Napple. Napple moves it across, and there's contact between the two cars. Fleddy, though, keeps it in it and makes a bit of contact again. This is a bad tempered battle for 11th place, and Napple just about hangs on to it. Moved right over on Fleddy, and I'm not sure if Fleddy's going to be too happy about that. Towards Bruxelles corner, stays in behind, no way through. Napple getting the elbows out in defence, and we're seeing these drivers getting into it. Fleddy just picked up a time penalty. Obviously frustrations rising for the Mercedes man, but really pushing hard then, and that could have very easily ended in disaster with Napple there.
Yeah, really good. And in the midst of that, Fleddy did pick up the fastest Sector 1 time, so even with the contact and the fighting with Napple, it looks like Fleddy has some decent pace, at least in Sector 1 and potentially Sector 3 as well, as that is Vessel getting past Slash down the inside. Very good move there from Vessel, as he is just over a second behind Fleddy, but Slash isn't giving this up. He is still within 2 tenths behind Vessel, but going back to the top, Tom and Moranvi have decided to pin. Maybe they think it's time to switch to the Inters.
Yeah, maybe the rain is just a little bit lighter than it was earlier. Yes, it is going to be intermediates in the pits. Well, this is going to make things very, very exciting. NLR Tom, who was running in second, there was small contact with Alex Marciano, who ran into the back of him as Tom was heading into the pit lane. I don't think Alex has major front wing damage, at least controlling that car out of Radion, but it hasn't been an easy time for Alex Marciano so far. Tom does emerge, Moranvi, Galaxy Slayer, Triska, these guys have all come in, Geppo as well at the back of the field. Now let's see the pace. What's it going to be like for these intermediate runners? The rain maybe not quite as heavy, and these drivers think they can gamble on that, but it is a bit of a risk. We'll see if the wet runners are going to stay out, but if the rain is easing off, it means that eventually we will inevitably transition over to that intermediate, and it will become the tyre of choice. And judging by that gap from Tom to Lakitu, those intermediates seem to be hooked up very nicely already.
Yeah, definitely are, and just look at, well, I'm just on board with Tom at the moment, and it doesn't seem like he's struggling at all on the Inters. So all the other drivers seeing this are thinking, right, now's the time to pit, or even they might be regretting not pitting on the previous lap. But yeah, he's already cut a second out of Lakitu, and it's just going to keep on going down and down. So Tom he's definitely going to inherit the race lead, I'd say. This is definitely Inter's conditions now, as he briefly got the fastest Sector 2, but I was quickly taken by Moranvi, who is equally as fast as the McLaren man in front of him.
Look at this, every single driver at the front of the grid is pitting. Zviadek doesn't, because he was behind Spyros, his teammate, and couldn't double stack. A couple of drivers are going to lose out from that. Tom has scythed into the gap of Lakitu, took well over 2 seconds out of him in the end, and that means he's going to come out right near the front of the race. Spicer, let's see where he's going to be, because Moranvi in that kick Sauber is going to be in contention as well. He's managed to stick with Tom, and out of the pit lane comes Spicer, is going to lose out to Moranvi as well. So that undercut, that getting onto the Inters that lap earlier has made such a big difference. Moranvi now runs in a net P2 at the moment, and there are still several cars out there on the circuit who have yet to get onto the engines. Here comes Spicer again. No, trying to reclaim that position on the road from Moranvi. Squeezes him right to the edge of the road, but gets himself through into possession number 9. Nice stuff from Spicer. Recovers quickly and now just has his teammate in front of him. Moranvi, though, he'll be happy with the way the pit stops, maybe happier than anyone else, is now right in that lead fight and has gapped the likes of his teammate Galaxy Slayer. Alex Marciano round the outside. AGK Racing looks on Galaxy Slayer, nothing doing then as this third place, well, a net fourth place train actually behind Alex Marciano emerges, and he's got work to do to try and get back towards the two McLarens and Moranvi. As for the rest of the drivers, though, well, they are surely going to be wanting to head into that pit lane. Of course, a lot of these guys simply weren't able to pit because they would have stacked behind their teammates. And what could actually happen here, NLR Tom is rapidly gaining on these drivers, and this could lead to a bit of a kerfuffle here, as I imagine a lot of these guys are going to go to the pits. We are coming towards the end of lap 7 of the Belgian Grand Prix. Rain is easing and drivers are transitioning from full wets on to grooved intermediate tyres. But Tom getting very close to Moikule, and he will be praying that every single one of these cars in front is going to dive to that pit lane. Certainly the majority of them are going to do that. Mattia Manga, though, is an exception. The Ferrari man stays out, and he could potentially play quite a bit of a role here. Tom up behind sets the fastest lap of the race. There's no question about who are faster cars behind, but Mattia Manga has no obligation to give up this lead, and how the Ferrari driver holds on to this lead, or maybe doesn't hold on to this lead, could massively impact how these intermediate runners are going to shake up. This could be the opportunity the likes of Alex Marciano, Galaxy Slayer were looking for to get themselves back in, but Tom is going to waste no time, gets out of that slipstream, pulls out, and his teammate Spicer follows him through. The McLaren surging forward in. Spicer tucks in behind Tom, and they've disposed of Mattia Manga very nicely. That was a very important move for both the McLarens there.
Yeah, it definitely was, and the one thing that's really helped them out here is the fact that Moranvi is still behind Mattia Manga. But as I say, that goes down the inside and he gets a move done, so not exactly at the point they would have hoped for, but he still has both McLarens within touching distance.
You can see a bit of oversteer there from Mattia Manga. Those wet tyres just not happy. They may be overheating even at this stage, as the damper line, you can see without any of the standing water, it's very, very clear now on the circuit, and wet tyres just aren't going to cut it at this stage. They will not be providing the grip. Alex Marciano now charging through. He can get himself into this lead fight if he can get through quickly, as AGK Racing picks up a time penalty. That is certainly not going to help his chances. That said, he has a massive gap to Triska behind, as here comes Alex Marciano towards Blotchimon, gets up onto the outside. The championship leader goes round the outside of the Ferrari, gets up into P4 and hasn't lost a great deal of time, in the top 3 still within his sights. He's keeping them very honest at the moment, as Mattia Manga predictably dives into the pits. You would have to say a lap or even 2 laps too late. He goes in, but that's going to be, I imagine, almost irreparable damage to his race. He's going to drop well down the field. He got to fight for the race. He'd actually led the race for a little while, but I think that strategy call, staying out for longer on those intermediates, is really working against him, and the Ferrari is plummeting down the order.
Yeah, I think, well, I sort of understand the thinking about it, due to the fact that his tyres are going to be the freshest out of, well, everyone's, whereas Inter's going to be the freshest, and he's going to have better tyres come the end of the race. But yeah, leaving it 2 laps after everyone else pits in clearly Inter's conditions has really detrimented his race.
Currently running in P17 is through Malmedy. We've got battling, Nick getting through on Triska, moves up yet another position. They want to drive through the field that has been from the Williams. Now has his teammate in his sights. Triska, who after, well, being very strong in the wet in Australia, seems to have a harder time with it this time around, and as Viadek is looking a bit more impatient in that Red Bull, so is Fleddy. And behind Triska slides. He does have older tyres than most of these guys, and we may be seeing the effects of that, struggling in this train. It's Viadek, looks to the inside of Lufania, can't quite find one. These drivers are right up behind. Look at Fleddy, so close to As further back, I think Matisse Moikuli, they were fighting it out. Lakitu as well in a train for 14th position at the moment, so there are still battles all the way around the track at the moment as Zviadek tries to get out of the slipstream, goes to the right, then to the left. Does he have the straight line speed to get up and alongside? Gets squeezed onto the grass, tries to find that space, but nothing doing then, and then Fleddy is going to try and follow through in that Mercedes. Zviadek finds a little bit of space onto the bus stop, has to brake on the wetter point of the track, but does get it stopped, turned in and through into position 9. Triska manages to resist Fleddy through the bus stop, but is sliding down the order and seems to lack for pace at this stage, losing places hand over fist at the moment, now down into 10th place and just holding on by a thread in the points at the moment. Fleddy, Vessel, Napple, they are all going to get very interested in taking that possession away. He's up at the front of the field. The two McLarens swap. Spicer and Tom swap possession, so Spicer goes back to the lead of the race from NLR Tom, but it looks as though these guys are more worried about collectively resisting the drivers behind. There was no battle then, it was just a nice civilized almost swap between two drivers for the race lead, and they are just trying to run the team game, if you like, and resist the likes of Moranvi and Alex Marciano. Right now they are working very well together and keeping the chasing pack at bay.
Yeah, and just looking at the gap between Triska and Moi Cully, Triska's gotta have, well, he's gotta be struggling a lot, because that gap has, well, since Radion, it's fallen at least a second, but as Moi Cully's spun, they must have had some sort of a slide, because he's dropped all the way down to 18th place now.
Yeah, and detached from the train. Didn't quite get a look at it as to what ended up happening, but yeah, I did see the yellow flags, and Moikuli dropping down a number of spots, currently in 18th position with a lot of work to do in this race. The pack is still relatively bunched up from P7 downwards. There's a monster gap between Galaxy Slayer 6th and Nick in 7th. Nick has gone through on his teammate Slash, now leads along this train, trying to unleash as much of that pace as you can, but that is quite a substantial gap, and we'll probably be hoping for a safety car, if anything, to close that down. Can I just mention, and I have had a monumental commentator's curse earlier on in this season, but I'm going to risk it anyway. It's pretty remarkable up to this stage with 19 drivers still left in this race as Alex Marciano draws level with Moranvi, heading up towards Lecom. Moranvi trying to stay in it, but Alex breaks much later and gets himself into that third position. Moranvi hasn't quite been able to match the pace in the second stint of the cars around him, was with the McLarens, just got dropped from that battle. And finally, Alex Marciano, the championship leader, moves through into position number 3, and now will give chase towards those two McLarens, and maybe we'll get a three-way fight further down the order. Fleddy moved through on Zviadek further down the order too. Mattia Manga and Lakitu, who picks up a time penalty. Lakitu losing a couple of places then, didn't quite catch why, but he now runs in 17th position down there just in front of Moikuli now. But what I wanted to mention though is to really give a massive amount of respect to all these drivers for the way they've handled this race. Spa in the wet is a daunting prospect, and you have to say we still have 19 drivers in the race, all running nicely with that. I believe only Matisse picking up major damage. It is pretty incredible, the standard of driving being able to survive so strongly in conditions such as these.
Yeah, definitely have to give props to all of them for managing the race and just really just keeping it clean and not having any, well, major incidents apart from Matisse. So you got to give props to Gippo as well, being 20 seconds behind. Most drivers would have given up and gone into the pits, but you got to give props where it's due for Gippo just staying in this race. It might not be, like I said before, that doesn't look like it's favourable conditions for him, but that is Trist, who's come in again to pit off these Inters. I think he must have burned them out early on, because I did see at one point he did have a fastest lap, and I think he may have just been pushing too hard a bit too early on his stint and just completely burned out the tyres.
Well, we did see how much he was struggling for pace in the last few laps. That train that's running behind Nick at the moment, he was at the head of that train and just slid down the order, it must be said, as the two Ferraris swap places down there. Mattia Manga moving through on
Oh,
Matisse.
Moranvi just on the exit of No Name, just all over the exit curb and picking up a bit of gravel, and he's just lost nearly a second to the back of Alex Marciano, and just, yeah, it was almost a very big incident there for Moranvi.
He's had a tough stint up to this point, gained massively through pitting earlier under the pit window, that transition from the wets onto the intermediates. But yeah, so far this race has not turned, or this stint I should say, has not gone his way up to this point. Still running nicely in position 4, but yeah, with quite a bit of work to do to stay with that top 3. Spicer and Tom working well at the front as we head on to the 13th lap of this race, but Alex Marciano is coming very, very slowly, chipping away at those two McLarens at the front. The gap was about 2.2 seconds when he moved through on Moranvi a couple of laps ago, now down to 1.8 seconds. So if he can keep this up, which is no mean feat because those two McLarens are motoring themselves up ahead, but Marciano is keeping himself at least within a fighting chance, but doesn't seem to have the straight line speed here in this first sector to match these guys. Tom pulling that gap back away by quite a massive margin. He does have the slipstream off of Spicer, of course, but nevertheless, that gap really extending. It seems as though Alex Marciano running a bit more downforce. He's quick in the corners, but that suggests that even if he is going to manage to catch these two McLarens at the front, the lack of straight line speed he seems to have is going to mean that overtaking them is going to be a very tough challenge indeed.
Yeah, I think the main overtaking spots for Alex here are really into Lake Combs and into La Source, I'd say. But then again, he needs to be really up close to the back of Tom to even consider getting moved on. As like you said, the straight line speed for Alex just isn't there, and look at the gap now, 1.2 seconds. He definitely is benefiting from a higher downforce setup than the two McLarens up ahead.
Higher downforce, typically a good weapon to have in wet conditions, but yeah, that's going to make it very difficult even still to find a way through. And you can see in this full throttle section that gap was down in about 1.1, 1.2, back up to 1.5. He gains in the bus stop, under braking and through the apex. He gains, and that's the case through most of these corners. But yeah, we'll see what happens when he's able to get towards these guys. Tom in second place. Oh, we do finally have a retirement Napple in a VSC deployed. Well, CPI Napple has unfortunately lost it, and that is one of the corners where I said it's easy in the dry, not easy by any stretch of the imagination in the wet. And CPI Napple unfortunately falling foul to that. We do have our first retirement of the Belgian Grand Prix in a VSC deployed. So Boy Cooley decides to go in to the pits, the only driver that's decided to do so. The rest of the drivers staying out. The VSC I don't think is going to change the race situation a great deal, but depending on how well you manage the restart, you may be able to gain a little bit of time. But unfortunate for CPI Napple. Had a really good race last time out in Kota, but not his night tonight. And yeah, CPI Napple, who was really in those midfield fights, went all out, crashes out of the race unfortunately, as IRT Fleddy, well, I said how well we can manage the restart can make a difference, and speeding can also make quite a bit of a difference. IRT Fleddy, I think, just about exceeding that delta time. A drive-through penalty, oh, that's a big blow to the Mercedes man's race.
Yeah, definitely is, but I'm just looking on board with Alex Marciano for this restart, and off the restart he's gained already 4 attempts, and it restarted at really the perfect time for him in the middle. Well, just at the start of Sector 2, because now it's a 1 second gap. He's under, or just teetering on the edge of the 1 second, but now the straight line speed is kicking in from the McLarens, and all the work he did in Sector 2 is just slowly getting undone. But as we've seen before, he gains a lot of time through the bus stop, and it wasn't the cleanest run, but he still managed to gain, well, on the exit he lost about 2 tenths, but through the corner he gained 2 tenths, so it equaled itself out. But yeah, Fleddy is into the pits, and he's got the 10-second time penalty as well for speeding, and he's retired from the session in the pit lane, which is so unfortunate for Fleddy. It's a really unfortunate penalty to pick up the drive-through, but yeah, it's just it looked like he was having a really strong race. He was in the points when he picked up the drive-through, but yeah, it's just an unfortunate penalty to get if you're Fleddy, and it was potential points that have been missed for the Mercedes team.
Yeah, frustration kind of boiling over for Fleddy, and he retires for the race. He and Sieb, who has been replaced by Geppo for this round as a reserve, currently fifth in the constructors, so a decent start to the season. They had a very good round in the Australian Grand Prix, with Fleddy finishing fourth in that race, but the other wet race this season not working in his favour. One thing I want to point out, though, Quinn, as we get into the later laps of this race, and Alex Marciano hones in on the two McLarens, look at how light that rain has gotten. It is just, well, it's barely drizzling it down at this stage now after the almost monsoon-like conditions we had to start the race, and that makes you wonder how this could unfold. I'm not saying it is going to go to slicks by the end as Spicer gets a bit of a snap through Blanchimont, but those conditions have massively evolved, and you can see it there. From pouring it down at the start, it's barely raining out there now.
Yeah. But in fact, I believe the rain has actually just stopped. So now it's just about how fast the track does eventually dry up, and if it does dry up and it gets to slicks too late on in the race, we could potentially see some drivers just stick it out on the intermediates.
Well, look at this. Into the pit lane immediately, Galaxy Slayer for a set of medium tyres.
And
Lakito as well in the Aston Martin further back. So, of course, some of the drivers you could say who have nothing to lose in this race, Lakito actually opting for the soft tyres, going for a big grip off the start. Well, for me, this is still too early, but we will see if these guys are able to make it work. As I said, they have nothing to lose. Galaxy Slayer frantically weaving towards Radeon to get some temperature into those tyres. That's going to be the real battle out there. And yeah, this is a driver we're going to have to watch very, very closely out there as the Kick Saubers swap places. AGK Racing moving up into fourth place, 5 seconds though off the leaders. Galaxy Slayer heading around. It's not too bad actually. I expected it to be worse, but he is losing still some time to Spiros up ahead. 5.7 the gap, 5.8, struggling to control the car on the entry to Brussels. And as soon as you get off that drier line and onto the wet stuff, because you can see off the racing line it's still quite wet, that's when on the slicks you can lose a bit of time. It's not a disaster, but it's not quite ready. Triska's crashed out, and we have a VSC. Triska, the other Alpine, out of the race now, heading out of Radeon. And unfortunate for him, who had a great start to the race and has just gone from bad to worse since then. Triska now gone. And it makes you wonder if some of these drivers are going to pit off the VSC.
Full safety car. Full safety car. Yeah, the safety car's out on track. We could see people pitting in. The McLaren's double stacked.
Yeah.
Well, if you're the McLarens, you have to. Because once you get behind the safety car, you're just going to plummet down the field. But Spicer, well, they've got enough of a gap that I don't think it will affect them too much. I think he may just drop behind Marambi if the timing is good on the stop. I believe he's just dropped behind AGK, so it's damage limitation at the moment. But yeah, everyone should be pitting for slick tyres. The Galaxy is retired from the session.
Yeah, I believe that's in the pit lane. Oh no, it's actually out on track. His car is still moving. I actually can't see it, but it looks like that's a retirement on track, which
He must have. I did see they got drive-through. He was speeding under the safety car. So I think he just retired on track because he had that drive-through penalty. Which we don't want to see people retiring out on track. We want to see people finishing the race, even if you're outside the points. We want to see people finishing the race.
oh yeah, can certainly echo that. And yeah, retiring just out of frustration alone isn't something we quite want to see. But that's the fourth casualty of this race. And while I was saying how remarkable it was that we had no retirements, they have stacked up since then. So I guess you could call it another commentator's curse from myself. That's another one to add to the list. So now, for a couple laps, these guys can really work on these slick tyres, but it's going to be difficult to maintain temperature, even though the entire grid is on the soft tyres, which is obviously the tyre where it's best suited to getting the temperature in and getting them working straight away with a track that's still got quite a bit of water situated on it, and being sat behind a safety car, it's going to be a real battle for these guys to maintain temperature and have the grip necessary when the race does get back underway.
Yeah, and I believe it's just common knowledge that in these conditions where there is still a bit of water on track, the softer compounds are typically the better out of the three dry compounds in these sort of conditions. So I understand why everyone has gone onto the softs. But something I just wanted to mention quickly, now that they're on a drying track, seeing the straight line speed from the McLarens, they seem like the two cars that are going to be best suited to the drier conditions.
As Moranvi in the Kick Sauber goes into the pits, and to be honest, I'm not quite sure why at this stage. Maybe just to get a lap fresher tyres, but he was, what we spotted out there, Quinn?
That was Moy Cully just coming out of the bus stop chicane, just got on the throttle a little bit too much and nearly veered into the wall on the left side. But he managed to keep it out, and Moranvi's gone on to intermediates.
Wow. Okay, that is that is a brave strategy call from Moranvi with the drying track. He gave up a lot of track possession there, was running in P5 out there on the slicks, just the same as everyone else has decided. Well, he does also have front wing damage. I don't believe he decided to repair it in the pits, which I think he could have gotten away with given the gap to Sviatek, but nevertheless goes on to the intermediates, gives up all that track position. Maybe the softs didn't feel good under the safety car without that kind of temperature in the tyres, but the track surface seems to be drying rapidly. There's not much water even off the racing line now. The Ferrari of Matisse stacks it into the wall, manages to get away without much or seemingly any damage, but wow, that was I imagine quite a nervous moment for Matisse, but managing to hold on, though, at the very least and stay in P9. But yeah, Moranvi, though, going on to the intermediates, that seems like a bizarre strategy call from my eyes. Maybe the Inters will be better off the restart, but with all the track position that he gave up, could they possibly bring him back to where he was before? That, to me, that seems unlikely.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, maybe he just wasn't comfortable on the softs in these conditions. And as we saw a few moments ago, we saw multiple cars going off track, and not sure what's happened there between AGK and Alex. But positions have been restored, and on lap 18 going into lap 19, it doesn't look like the safety car is going to be coming in unless it is a late call, because Gippo's just getting onto the back of Spiros. If it is going to be a late call, it is a late call. I was going to say it's going to be a very late call. Yeah, Tom has the restart. It is all in his hands. He's got what's going to be a very feisty Alex Marciano on the back of him.
setting up to get this race back underway. Out of the final corner, accelerates. NLR Tom gets racing back underway here at Spa, swirling all over the road as Vessel. And these slicks certainly not easy to handle in these conditions. AGK Racing coming under pressure from NLR Spicer, who forces the Kicksauber right to the edge of the track, trying to get up into that third place, and does so. NLR Spicer moves through with a tough move on the restart, but we saw Vessel all over the road. That moves Nick slash P5, P6 Vessel in the hash, trying to hold on to it. Some drivers will have got the tyres into the operating window better than others. Morandi, of course, the only driver on the intermediates, is Spicer looking at Alex. Oh, a big lunge to the inside of Lacombe, and there was contact between the two cars who have duelled throughout the season already. This time they are really getting into it, and there's 4 cars covered by almost no distance. Spicer and Alex Marciano bang wheels again, and the Aston is forced out wide, losing places, and Nick gets onto the podium in a full safety car as Spiros has gone out of Malmedy corner at the highest point on the circuit. So Spiros now out. I think this is the last lap that a safety car can actually be deployed, and we'll get things resumed now with McLaren's 1 and 2. Spicer put a tough move on Alex. Spiros unfortunately out of the race, and we now have 14 cars running. The safety car will pick them up on lap 20, and I think the race should, I believe, get underway at the end of lap 20. So Spiros unfortunately gone. We will resume very, very shortly with McLaren's now 1 and 2, but yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the safety car will have to bring them in at the end of lap 20 and will give us a 2-lap shootout to end the race.
Yeah, it's the definition of a sprint race here, and if you're Morambi, it's just going to get from bad to worse, because now, I'm just going to go out and say he's probably going to end up pitting for softs again, which is going to really, it's going to put him right at the back of the grid, as he doesn't actually.
He decides to stay out on the inters, and but at this point we are essentially, I know the track temp may be down, there's still little patches of water maybe well off the racing line or on curbs, but generally speaking the track is, for all intents and purposes, pretty much dry at this stage. Certainly from this camera shot I'm looking at, you can't really see a whole lot of water out there. So Moranvi, and of course these guys, they will of course be fighting to maintain that tyre temperature, but they did get at least half a lap of hard racing to be able to get the tyres up to running. So yeah, Moranvi, you'd have to say, is maybe got let a potential top 5, maybe even a podium, slip away here, and what was looking like an awesome race with a big haul of points for Kicksauber, a team that does certainly need that, with currently sitting 8th in the Constructors. But yeah, that is, because I can't see how this is going to work for Moranvi now, but yeah, with AGK Racing also having that time penalty, he's going to lose several places. It's looking like a much improved race for Williams though. Their drivers have certainly had a turn up for the books, especially Nick, who now runs from 15th on the grid up to 3rd, up 12 positions, the most of anyone actually. Mattia Manga and Lakitu also up 9 positions, so great drives from those guys too. But IRT Nick, what a drive through the field, kind of mimicking what we saw from Tom last week, recovering from a subpar qualifying session. IRT Nick on the podium, and well, we've seen how fast those two McLarens have been, especially in a straight line, and they've dominated this race up to this point, but IRT Nick will be fancying his chances after what has been a truly superlative drive to get onto the podium at the moment.
Yeah, and it's quite reminiscent of a certain Max Verstappen. The race is gone. Of course, his reason for starting low down was grid penalty, and of course going out in Q2, but yeah, it's reminiscent of the drive we saw of Max, of course, differing conditions to the ones we had at Brazil yesterday. But yeah, it's been a very good drive so far for Nick, and well, in his eyes, the only way is forward.
Yeah, well, forward is the only direction he's travelled in so far throughout this race, as Tom gets things underway earlier, and that was surely coordinated with Spicer. He reacted superbly well and is right on the back of his teammate. Nick is pressing on hard as AGK Racing picks up another time penalty. How costly is that going to be? Geppo gets one as well at the back of the field. Has not been an easy race for the Mercedes as Nick fades to the inside towards La Source. No way through at the moment and gets a bad run, it must be said, through the apex. That's going to put Alex Marciano in contention as Tom disappears up the road just over a second clear. Spicer works his way back into DRS range. Of course, we won't have DRS here. We will have it on the final lap where things will finally kick off for good. As further back, Slash is attacking AGK Racing to rub salt into the woods, moves up into the top 5. What a race it has been for Williams up to this point. Slash moves up into the top 5 and Spicer gets a penalty. Spicer second place on the road again, another costly error at the dying stages of a race, just like we saw in Australia, and time penalties costing him just like they did in the Circuit of the Americas race. That is going to promote Nick up into second place, Alex Marciano to third, and Slash to fourth as things stand as we navigate this penultimate lap with Tom still leading.
Yeah, I was just on board. I'm just on board with Vessel now as he got an exceptional exit out of no name and looked to potentially, well, tried to make it difficult for AGK, but he's just dropping back now. And yeah, this is, well, Spicer's gonna have a big part to play if Tom is gonna get a win because he's got Nick and Marciano around him. Of course, Tom's gonna play a team game here and give Spicer well, he's gonna play, well, obviously for the race win because he's gonna be giving Spicer the DRS, which is in turn, what? I haven't seen the message come up that it's activated yet.
Oh, there it is.
It is, yeah, it is. But yeah, it's gonna be very close actually. He does get DRS, so he's gonna have Spicer as that buffer for Nick and Alex Marciano behind. But Nick has really got a lot of overspeed and he's just not going to have enough room to get a move done. No desperate dives down the inside here from Nick or Alex or even Slash, as that is Matisse now getting a penalty. You can see how hard these guys are pushing.
Wow.
And Moranvi as well getting a penalty here. But Nick is really on the back of Spicer, but Spicer's still got a massive gap to Tom ahead, his teammate. And looking at the gaps, he's gonna drop behind, well, not AGK. I think he's gonna come out in about 7th after the penalty is applied. But one man that we should be looking at the moment is Tom. As soon as it turned to dry conditions, he just showed his pace, and albeit it was helped by the penalty from Spicer, he has just shown his ultimate pace in dry conditions, albeit only a few laps. He's coming up to the bus stop chicane now, as that is Nick and Alex fighting away. But he's going to get the win. Tom and Alex and Nick complete the podium with Slash in. AGK drops all the way down to 11th, but Mattia Manga up 11 positions.
Wow, that is going to bring the Belgian Grand Prix to a close, and NLR Tom from PSF 5 champion last season. He started this season absolutely superbly with podiums in both the opening round in Australia and with that comeback drive last time out at the Circuit of the Americas. But this takes the cake so far in PSF3. He is your winner for the third round of the championship. And kind of just halts Alex Marciano's dominance, at least for the time being. That said, Alex Marciano, that was some move on IRT Nick around the outside of the bus stop chicane to snatch away that P2, and Nick with a superb recovery drive to third. And for NLR Spicer, again, the question has to be asked, what may have been? So let's run through the results here. I think they're going to pop up. Nope, I'm not seeing them. Well, I don't know if you can see them, Quinn, but I've got a black
No,
screen at the
I'm not.
moment.
I'm not seeing them either.
Right, okay.
All I do know is that Mattia had gained 11 positions up into sixth, which is incredible for Mattia.
Yes, certainly was. And yeah, because he finished eighth on the road, but managed to pick it up, courtesy of penalties. Let me just see. Try to get a good look at the results so I can run through them. Right. Okay. So NLR Tom takes the race win with Alex Marciano narrowly edging out Nick for third place. Still a super recovery drive from Nick, and his teammate Slash ends up in possession number 4. Slash, who's had a very difficult start to the season, ends up bringing home his first points of the season and a good haul to go with it too. Williams, who were dead last in the constructors going into this race, well, they are certainly not dead last anymore. Great race from those guys with Vessel rounding out the top 5. Didn't look good for Vessel early on, but a really solid recovery. Ends up taking 5th from Mattia Manga in 6th, as you said, up 11 places. Then Spicer 7th. He was 1,000th of a second behind Mattia Manga in the overall results, and with an incredibly costly penalty, it must be said. And I think it was looking like he might move up in the standings. Maybe still, because he might move ahead of Triska in the championship and up into third, but some further away from Tom and Alex Marciano, who have defined the early exchanges in this season. Sviatek comes through in possession number 8 from Moikuli in ninth, and Matisse rounds out the top 10 for Ferrari. So that rounds off the results, and I'm just going to do a quick bit of mental maths in my head. Alex Marciano still leads the championship, of course, with a second place pole position. I'm not actually sure who got the fastest lap. I think I'll need to go double check that. But Alex, at the very least, is going to be on 48 points, with Tom will be, at the very least, on 36 points. So the gap does come down to 12 points between your two top two in the championship, and those guys have certainly separated themselves from the rest so far. So keep an eye out for that as we look forward to the rest of the season. The fourth round at Montreal, Quinn, is next up, and for me, from my perspective, that is a track that always provides just completely chaotic league races. So I think that's what we can expect from the next round.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, you have the infamous Wall of Champions, which has claimed, well, it's got that name for a reason. It's claimed many previous F1 champions out. And yeah, it's going to be a very interesting race. Of course, if we have similar conditions to today, it's going to be very much the same.
Yeah, well, that would certainly be a bit of a turn up for the books. For a third wet race in 4 rounds, of course. Well, it did turn very, very dry at the end. A full wet to full dry race. That is quite a remarkable transition that we just experienced. And well, the drivers had to put up with every sort of condition out there and performed admirably with NLR Tom taking the win. It's been an incredible rise up from PSF5. See how that rise continues at the next race at the Canadian Grand Prix. Be sure not to miss it. But I think that is going to be just about everything said and done for this race. Again, quick thank you to our sponsors once again, GT Omega and Sim Racing Centre. Links to both of their sites are in the description, and you can use the code PSGL at checkout for discounts on all of their products. Well, I think that is just about going to bring Spa Belgian Grand Prix to an end. So thank you all very much for watching. Thank you, Quinn, for being alongside me. It's been a great experience, and I can't wait to see you back in action in F4, I believe, starting next week. So that should be all good. But I think that should be just about everything said and done. So for myself and Quinn, it is goodbye for now, and until next time, we'll see you later.
See you.